and welcome to the debut episode of the Scrum Diego podcast, San Diego Legion's newest podcast, hosted by myself, Alex Corbisiero, Scrum coach here. So very fitting to be hosting the Scrum Diego podcast. This is a brand new venture from San Diego Legion. We're going to be speaking with our current players, interviewing stars across the San Diego sporting landscape, getting lots of insight in the season, tons of behind the scene action, and just really trying to cater to our loyal San Diego Legion fans, but also the US rugby market on a whole, and all you MLR fans out there as well. We're going to keep generating content, lots to talk about. This is our debut episode, and seeing it as the debut episode, we had to have a special guest, and we really do. We have San Diego Legion head coach, former All Black scrum half himself, Danny Lee, on the podcast to talk it all. We're going to go through his rugby career, go through his experiences coaching, his journey at San Diego so far, what to look forward from the Legion this season, and much, much more. Let's get into it. We are joined by our inaugural guest on the Scrum Diego podcast. This guy was begging to come on. It was the only way he'd let me have a podcast if he could be the first guest on it. We've got head coach from the San Diego Legion, Danny Lee. Danny, welcome to Scrum Diego, mate.
Thank you. Thanks
Cheers.
for having me. Yeah, it's a pleasure being first up.
Yep, first up, mate. A reminder, this podcast is sponsored by Legion Lager from Kings and Convents Brewing Co., sponsor of the San Diego Legion as well. Best lager around. Cheers, mate. All right, Danny. Let's start off from the beginning. If you look at your Instagram, first opening line on your bio is been there and done that as a player. So let's focus on the playing side first before we get to the coach. Talk a little bit about your rugby journey.
Yep. Good question. It's one of those things that, for me as a Kiwi kid, just grew up with rugby in the veins. Started playing when I was 4. Had 2 older brothers that were playing rugby, so therefore mum and dad dragged me along to Saturday morning rugby out in the frosty cold mornings. And then, every year since then, played rugby up until I was 35. So probably ticked off all the New Zealand representative boxes, as they say, with New Zealand under 16s, under New Zealand secondary schools, under 19s, and New Zealand Colts, which at that stage was New Zealand was under 21s. I think it's under 20s these days. So under 21s, I actually had 3 years in that New Zealand group, and then ultimately made the All Blacks in 2002. So pretty happy with my New Zealand rugby career through there. Played for a lot of teams within New Zealand as well, moved around for opportunities. Started at my own hometown provincial union, Hawke's Bay, when I was 18. I was still at school, my last year at school actually, so I was only 18 and coming across some gnarly old dudes back in the day that were pretty rough and ready and pretty intimidating. So earned my stripes, you could say, when I was younger and through that early part of my professional career, and then, as I said, just sort of moved from team to team throughout New Zealand, represented counties and represented Otago, and then same with Super Rugby. So Super Rugby followed those provincial unions, so represented the Chiefs, represented the Highlanders, had a year with the Blues as well, and then finished my career in Wales with the Newport Gwent Dragons. The
bright lights of Newport, mate. Yeah. That must have been nice. I know that service station well.
Yeah, very, very nice place. Great club, and for us, it was one of those things where I'd left it late in my career to head overseas. I think I was 33. We looked on it as a life experience as well. Had 2 young kids at that stage, and spent 2 years over there and finished up my career there. So sort of been there and done that, as I put on my Instagram page.
Exactly,
so
mate. Exactly.
The stalker's got me, and he's found out a whole lot about
that's what I'm good at, Matt. Digging up dirt. But okay, let's talk a little bit about playing for the All Blacks. So obviously, the highest honour in New Zealand. What was that like? Finally getting the call up and getting to represent them.
Oh, it was unbelievable. Like, as I said, rugby's in the veins. Everyone that grows up in New Zealand wants to be an All Black, and I'd always said early in my life that I was going to be a professional rugby player and be an All Black to all family and friends, and people would laugh at me at that stage because it wasn't a professional sport. So For me, it was the ultimate. It was a lot of hard work, and as I said, I've moved around a lot to further my career and make myself a better player. So I think I was 26 at that stage. So I was sort of in the prime of my rugby life, I think you could say. And we ended up having a tour to England, France, and Wales.
2002, right?
2002, not all that successful, but
young Alex Corbisiero was in the crowd for that England game.
Yeah, that was obviously my debut in front of 65,000 people at Twickenham. Had my parents there as well, who had followed me throughout my whole career and managed to get on that trip too. So, unfortunately, went down to England, and in a funny sort of way, the next week we played France and we drew that 20-all. And then the last test of the tour against Wales I never played. So you could possibly say I haven't been that successful in the black jersey.
Probably one of the few winless All Blacks in history. Sorry to take the piss too much. We got some good stats here. Like, I've only played the All Blacks once, beat them once, so I'm undefeated against the All Blacks, which not many Englishmen could probably say.
Here it goes.
You haven't beaten England as an All Black, which not many All Blacks could probably say as well. But
thanks for that.
You're welcome, mate. You're welcome. It's what I'm here for, But I think that's sort of a wrap on the playing side. Talk a little bit about the transition into coaching and how you sort of left the game and where you found your way into this next journey.
Yeah, well, when I did move overseas and I was playing, I'd sort of had a feeling that it was coming to an end, as you do when you start to break down a little bit and things become a little harder than they used to be. So I'd sort of had in my mind that coaching could be an actual pathway for me and an option. So I, in fact, had done a bit of coaching overseas and coaching courses, and my mind started thinking more coaching, sort of player coaching than anything else. So I'd sort of dip my toes in that side of things at the latter stage of my career. And then when I did finish up, as I said, at 35, I returned back home to Hawke's Bay. I knew the two coaches that were in the provincial team there, and they sort of welcomed me on board as an extra pair of hands, really. Just doing it voluntary. I was doing some work around the analysis of the opposition. I'd be at trainings and help with the skills and just sort of add my 5 cents on everything. So pretty appreciative of them, involving me in that campaign that year. And then the following year, the actual job opened up as the assistant coach in that team and backs coach, and I applied and got that job. So I spent 5 years doing that with Hawke's Bay as the assistant coach. Had an opportunity to be a head coach in Japan at Honda, and jumped at that opportunity just to, again, further myself in terms of a rugby coach. And I feel that I have that ability to be a head coach. I sort of probably like to control things. Rather than sit in the background. And
I can second that. From working under you, I could say that's definitely a trait.
Yeah, so I had that opportunity and took that opportunity to go to Japan. Pros and cons in Japan and what you do and how you do things over there, but invaluable experience for me. And then that gig sort of started to wind up for a number of reasons through COVID and being away from family. I took that opportunity. My kids were a little bit older at that stage and at high school, and so we decided as a family that they would stay in New Zealand, further their education in good schools with my wife, and I'll do the lone soldier and head to Japan. So we did that for 4 years, and as I said, with COVID and things like that, that got on top of us, and we spent more and more time apart because of the borders closing. And in the end, we were like, well, it's getting pretty hard. Let's see what else is out there. So went home and then this job popped up. So jumped at the opportunity.
That's awesome, mate. And so part of your coaching journey, going from a player to a coach and then head coach, like what were some of the lessons you learned along the way and some of the sort of growth you did on that journey to becoming a head coach?
Yeah. No, that it was tough initially. I think anyone that goes pretty much from playing into coaching is going to find some bumpy road along the way, and I was no excuse from that as well, because I'd just found that when I'd first started coaching with the Hawke's Bay team, especially the first couple of years, I found that I was probably more of a directive, sort of a dictator type coach. I'd pretty much told all the players what they had to do and came up with all the plans and came up with the strikes and the moves, and this is the way that we were going to do it. And without me actually knowing that I wasn't getting the buy-in of the players and wasn't giving the players a voice. And I knew that, and not at the stage, but years after, I looked back and I looked at the way that I was coaching and thought, why was I doing it? And I mean, the simple answer was I was trying to prove myself. I'd come out of playing and gone straight into it, so I was like, what can I do to show that I can actually coach here? And I went over the top. I went to the other side. So, the other thing about it was that there was a lot of guys in that Hawke's Bay team that I'd actually played with, because I was still relatively young at that stage, and those guys were some of the older guys in that group. And again, it was just me trying to prove that I could coach to those guys as well. So, as I said, look back on that as I go through those other years, and then you sort of start to sit back and you become more of the coach that asks questions and allows the players to lead and make good decisions themselves. And you're still there. You're still there as a coach to frame it all out and to give them that opportunity. But you try and get the best of both worlds. You know, you have that ability to be able to coach, but also give the players the ability to be able to open up and do their thing as well. I found when I went to Japan, though, I had to go back to being a little bit more directive, because you've got a whole different group of player, different levels, different ages, and especially for some of the Japanese boys, they want to be told, and it's a cultural thing as well. You know, they come out of being kids with adults being told everything. They go to high school, they get told everything. They go to university and they get told everything. So they're expecting that as well. So it took me a couple of years in Japan to actually turn that around as well. So I knew what I was doing, though, at that stage as a coach, but it was one of those things that I had to do. Whereas the last couple of years in Japan, I tried to get them to be more interactive and get them to take the lead a little bit more. So a lot of those things, I think, has molded me into possibly the coach that I am now.
No, definitely. I think that's something, even just, I'm in the infancy of my coaching journey, but I think even from year 1 to 3 or whatever in this MLR, I have learned that, you know, at the beginning, I was very much dictating, like, this is how I want it. Like, this is how I want. And really, the journey of coaching is empowering your players. They're the ones on the field that have to make the decisions. You can obviously help influence from the sideline, but there's only so much you can do in the moment. So really the skill is like empowering them to thrive in the chaos, or to be able to make decisions and react. And that's really insightful that's something that you've sort of adopted into your journey as a head coach. And so, mate, one of the things with the league in Japan is it's probably, of all the leagues in the world, the most comparable to the MLR. You've got foreigners, domestic players. You've got a schedule that kind of syncs a little bit with what goes on in the MLR. But then you've also got a language barrier over there. Just talk a little bit about that experience in Japan.
I was probably thrown into the fire over there. First time as a head coach, new country, new people, new language, culture, everything else that goes with it. So it was a bit of a shock early on, but you're right. I think the competition mirrors the MLR a little bit in terms of the playing quality and the style of play, and then the guys around that same age that come out of college go into the top league in Japan. They come out of college here and they put their hand up for the MLR, and then you've got your foreigners that come in. So it's about trying to get the balance right. It's about trying to grow those younger boys and bring them up. I sort of use the octopus theory. So the octopus is dragging things up. So I'm trying to do that as a coach, trying to drag those younger players up to the level of the more experienced guys, or the guys with probably a little bit more quality. Some of our foreigners are obviously experienced rugby players, so I encourage our foreigners to coach the American boys as well, and try and encourage those guys to be better every day. So there is some real good similarities between the two countries and the competitions. The style's pretty similar as well. It's the Japanese like to run fast and do everything at 100 miles an hour, and obviously the athletes here in the States are prime athletes. You know, like they're built to move quickly. They're just sheer athletes that are big, strong, powerful, and fast. So there's massive similarities here. And I think for me, it's probably an advantage. And actually, that was one of the talking points in my interview when I actually got the job was the similarities and being able to transition from one competition into this one, hopefully seamlessly.
And, let's talk a little bit now about the decision to come to San Diego, sort of winded it up in Japan. What put MLR on your radar? And then also sort of like, how did it end up being San Diego?
As I was saying before, I'd come to the end of my 4th year in Japan and been away from home and the borders and the lack of family time that we'd had. So my wife and I had spoken and said, look, this is pretty tough now. Like, maybe we think about something different. So I returned home after that last Japanese season with Honda, and we sat down and thought, well, the boys are still, at high school. They're still a little bit older. Had one boy at university at that stage in Otago in New Zealand, living his best life down there. And then we went, right, let's get onto my agent and see what else is out there in the world. And initially, he was pretty quiet, my agent, and then I actually got in touch with a friend of mine, Tony Lambourne, who was a former Eagle, living in Hawke's Bay in New Zealand at the moment and playing over there. And he said, look, I've got a contact at San Diego Legion because he'd played here. And so he put me on to a guy, David Poole, who was running the operations here, and he was actually a Kiwi as well. And we had a good chat. He put me on to one of the owners, Darren Gardner, and we had a chat, and they were thinking about making some changes, and that snowballed into interviews and effectively got the job. So yeah, it was one of those ones that wasn't probably that straightforward. I had to do a lot of the groundwork myself and, work through a few different avenues. But all in all, it took probably a couple of months and signed on the line.
Nice, mate. And then what were your expectations of what you were getting into? And then what were your sort of like initial sort of experiences and thoughts when you got over here?
Yeah, I'd sort of heard of the MLR. It had exploded here, I think, in the previous year, and the LA team had some superstars in it with Australian rugby players, internationals with Matt Giddo and Billy Meeks, and for me it was like, wow, what's going on over there in the States? And that was while I was still in Japan. And I remember sitting in the office in Japan, and we'd have a big screen, and the MLR was actually playing on it, and you could see most people were working, but they were sort of watching the screen and really taking interest in it. So for me, it was something that I'd already seen, had popped up on my radar as something that, as a new competition, really exciting. The way that they played it was exciting. You had similarities, as I said, with the Japanese top league and I was like, wow, this is going to be cool. So I knew a little bit about it. I didn't know the actual running of the competition and how it sort of works along the same lines as the other American sports with trades and with drafts and all those sorts of things. So that was an eye opener when I first got here. But when I came on board, it was one of those things with San Diego. I'd heard a lot about the type of rugby that they played, that they were one of the more recognised teams in the comp, one of the initial founding teams in the competition. But I'd also heard that they hadn't won it. So for me, that was one of those incentives that, right, I'm going to get there, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that Legion wins this comp. And getting here and getting on with staff initially, trying to understand how things worked, the location and where I lived and everything else, it was all thrown at me pretty quickly, because by the time I got here through the visa process, we probably only had about 3 weeks before the comp started. So it was all go. Crash
course, basically, in getting a team ready in a league you've never experienced, with you know unbelievable amounts of travel and differences in pitches and things that maybe no one else really quite sort of appreciates, so they actually get here on the ground in the MLR.
No, it was crazy. Like even where I lived, to getting to training, to getting to the headquarters here, and understanding how things worked, driving on the wrong side of the road. Like the people that are here at Legion are, great people. I work for two great owners who are really passionate about Legion and rugby here in the States, Ryan Patterson and Darren Gardner. Both would sort of crawl over broken glass to make sure that Legion was playing good rugby and and there in the MLR was actually a stable rugby competition that is where it is at the moment. So I'm thankful for those two guys giving me the opportunity. But as you say, the actual competition was an eye-opener. You know, we were travelling from coast to coast, and I had no idea about the distance. Yeah. I'd get on a plane and we were going to New York, and I'd be like, oh yeah, we're on a plane, you know, maybe a couple of hours or whatever it is over there, and the pilot gets on the loudspeaker and he's like, yep, settle in for a good flight, and you know it's going to be about 6.5 hours over to New York. And I was like, what? Where are we going? Like, you fly from New Zealand to Australia, it's 3 hours, you know, and we're flying 6 hours to the other side of the country, but still in the same country. And then you've got the different pitches and surfaces that we play on here. You know, for me, in my career, I'd never played on turf, you know, like Astro artificial turf. There's half of our grounds on artificial, half are on grass, and some of them are really small in terms of how narrow they are and the length of them. So for me, it was learning something new every week. But I thought that was pretty cool. You know, it was one of those things where I'm in a different country, in a different league. I have to adapt to what goes on here. Not only driving on the other side of the road, but the actual rugby for what I was employed to do. And I think, you know, by halfway through the competition, you know, I started to really understand what it was all about.
So if you look at, you know, the season and how it went in year one in Legion, obviously, you know, we talked about coming in short pre-season, adjusting to a new league. It probably didn't go as you would have hoped or to plan. There were some highlight moments of winning the California Cup and a few, you know, obviously stings a little.
What do we win?
Yeah.
I think we've got it just around the corner.
Yeah, it's just around. I almost put it in the shop, but I couldn't stomach it. So I feel like that cup's staying in San Diego for a while now as well, with everything going on. But, you know, talk through some of the issues maybe you had, or some of the areas that maybe, you know, didn't perform and that you're hoping to address for next season.
Yeah, I think you said before that the hardest thing for me was coming in as a new head coach. I had new front office that I had no idea about. I had a new GM, and I had a new coaching staff. So Scott Murray, our forwards coach, had never met him other than, you know, 20 Zooms before I got here. I had a new defensive coach in Jack Wiggins, who I got in sort of quite late, and actually he turned up the week of the first game, so he had like 4 days to work his magic with the players. And then I had a whole group of players that I didn't know. I'd probably had 5% of them that I had a hand in trying to bring here or sign. You know, the other, you know, 95% was already signed from last season. So that's one of the harder things as a coach, is when you walk into a new environment, you're going to have predominantly a team that's really handpicked for you. So I had to look at my team and say, what have I got? How do they play? What style do we want to play? Not necessarily my own style and the way that I want to do things, but adapting to the players, which as a coach you have to do. You either go one way or the other, and you make the players do what you want as a coach, which may not necessarily work because of the cattle that you have, or you try and adapt as a coach to the cattle that you've got. So I end up trying to adapt to our players, and I think that was probably some of the harder things in the competition, and it probably took half the comp for me to realise who I had and their strengths and weaknesses, and then being able to make sure that I had some depth. And then we had injuries, and yeah, it wasn't a season that, you know, I'm overly proud about in terms of results, but it was a season that is invaluable to me going forward, because it's set some foundations. It's given me an idea of what I have and haven't got, and then have the opportunity in the off season to be able to put a squad together that I've handpicked.
And so let's look at this squad recruitment. And obviously you've had time now. You even just through the press, you can see new signings are being announced. So you've had a bigger hand in recruitment. How do you feel like the team is shaping up for next season?
Yeah, really good. You know, we got through to the end of last season and looked at ourselves as coaches and what we did. We looked at our squad and the numbers and the positions and the faces in those positions. Obviously, our results were not that good last year. We made the playoffs, but didn't go any further. I felt we had a team that could have possibly won the comp last year, but through all those other things that went on, and you know, and some of them are on me as well. You know, it's not just a players thing. And for me, it was looking at our squad and going, look, we've got to probably simplify things a little bit more. I think we've got to possibly train the guys a little bit longer and push them a little bit harder. But also in the cattle that I had, I felt that with the narrowness of some of the fields, we didn't quite have the punch that we needed. We didn't quite have the size and the physicality that we needed to be able to go through teams a little bit more. As a Kiwi, we like to throw it around and we like to be a little bit more dynamic and use the passing game. But when you've got a narrow field, you can't necessarily go around teams.
Yeah.
As much as you try and bunch players and opposition somewhere, you can't do that on a field that's 3/4 of the normal width in some cases. So those sorts of things that we had picked up from last season, we had to think about going forward into this season. The other thing was looking at our own home ground. I mean, we were probably struggling on our own home ground last year, whereas this year we're going to be on a full-size rugby field, one of the best stadiums in the world. But going back to the squad and the off-season, we've recruited well. We've been able to pick up some real athletes that are going to bring us raw power, size, and some physicality. And I've also got the backs to be able to finish off things with a little bit of razzle and some good footwork and skills. But I think the other part of it is just getting our set piece right. We struggled a little bit last year, and our line out, we didn't get exactly what we wanted off it. So we've brought in some players to be able to help us in that area, and then our scrum. We've brought the scrum guru and
there he
somehow
is, mate. The host of Scrum Diego, mate. That's where we like to be.
The guy that stalked me,
I begged my way into the place.
DM'd me, emailed me, rang me, ended up face on the window at me, just trying to get a shot. And here you are, mate.
Here I am, mate.
No pressure.
That
no
blue
pressure.
tick, bro. I slid right in those DMs with that blue tick. You can't hide from me there.
But mate,
no.
like the scrum's going to be important. We've got to be dominant there. We've got to make sure that we're providing top quality ball because we've got the rest of the players in the squad. Given the right ball on the front foot, we're going to be able to beat any team in the comp.
No, definitely. And then as you look ahead, obviously you just touched on it a little bit, but last year the stadium obviously was, exposed to the elements. It was windy, it was narrow. How excited are you now to have Snapdragon and to have this amazing stadium that's your home field? You know the type of rugby you can play on it, full width, grass, but also an opportunity to build something here in San Diego and try and get some fans behind the squad as well.
Yeah, totally. We've in the last year we've seen the stadium be built. It got to that stage pretty quickly, to be honest, and you see them playing on there now with football and soccer, and it's unbelievable. We're so excited to be able to get a chance to be on there for us as a playing team in rugby in this country, but also to drag the fans along. We've got a state-of-the-art grandstand and stadium that they're going to have perfect seats to be able to watch. As you see, the pitch is full rugby size. It's grass. It's going to be lush. Like the boys are going to be so stoked to be able to get out there and play on it. I think it's going to, we're going to grow an extra arm to be out there and playing and have that opportunity. But it's also one of those things here in San Diego that the Chargers, the football team, were here, and they moved out of town. We've got the other sports that, real high-profile sports in the US. You got baseball with the Padres who have done so well in this last competition that I had no idea about baseball, but now I'm a Padres
You're a bandwagon fan, mate.
Yeah,
We love it.
I'm straight in there and on that
whipping
bandwagon.
towels around.
Yeah,
mate.
yeah, you got to. But you could see the spirit and the San Diego people. You can see that them loving their sports and loving their team sports. And for us, you look at the Chargers who have left, we're like, right, that's our avenue. That's the box that we're going to jump straight into. Contact sport, no helmets, no pads. Let's try and drag all those football fans across to be Legion supporters and to be able to have the Snapdragon Stadium there, us playing in it on a beautiful sunny San Diego day with thousands and thousands of people come along to watch us is the ultimate, and that's the plan for the season coming.
What can we expect from the Legion on the field this season? Like where do you see the team going? And for the fans, give us something to get excited about.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've laid that foundation last year. Disappointed in what we achieved, and disappointed in myself as well. Like I knew that we had a fairly good team on paper, didn't quite perform, didn't quite click. And as I said, it goes back on me as well, and what I'm creating here and the environment that I'm setting for the players. So lots of learning in the last season, lots of learning in the off season, as we spoke about. But for me, I'm just super excited to get back into it. I know I've got a team on paper that can win the comp. I know our style that we want to play is going to be hard to stop for teams, and I know we're going to have to work pretty hard on both sides of the ball. As much as I'm the attack coach and I want to score tries and bosh other teams around the park, we've got to make sure we're equally as effective on defence as well. So there's going to be a lot of work going on that side of the ball as well. But yeah, I'm just super excited to get back into it. I mean, ultimately, I want to win the comp. I mean, that's what I'm here for. I believe we've got the team to win it. I know we've got the stadium to be able to perform on, and I know we're getting more and more numbers in our community, in our region they're actually switching on to rugby and finally understanding the game, and they're bringing their mates, and I'm hoping that we can fill the stadium out, perform, throw out some outstanding style of rugby that they love to come along and watch, and then just keep banging it every week.
Awesome, mate. Awesome. And then, let's get away from the rugby a little bit. You've been in San Diego now for about a year almost. Talk a little bit through, the place, what you like about it, and, what it's like to live here.
Yeah, I mean, I'd heard a lot of things about it. I'd obviously been on Google before I came over and looked at places to be. And I mean, the biggest thing is the beaches. Like we're on the coast here. I surf, and my young boy surfs, and we're a couple of blocks from the beach. So for me, it was coming here was about getting that work-life balance. As much as the first 6 months was work and trying to get into an environment that I had no idea about in a new competition, I've been able to now settle in and know where I am and the quality of San Diego. The weather's beautiful. I think we had four rainy days in the last 10 months. As I said, the beaches, but there's also beautiful places to be, and parks and outstanding restaurants and food. I think those are some of the qualities of San Diego, which keeps the San Diego people here, and that's what throws that vibe out to the rest of the world around this beautiful place that we live in.
No, definitely. And what about coffee spots? Anywhere that you like to go for your coffee that you find here? San Diego's pretty well known for that.
Yeah, there's a number of them. I'm close to a Buzz coffee shop, and they've got quality coffee, hot and cold, and as you say, there's a number of them around, as well as restaurants. So we're pretty lucky to be in a place that ticks a lot of boxes.
Yeah.
I'm a big coffee drinker as well, and I know you are.
Yeah.
You want to throw the little Bird Rock?
Bird Rock may have been trying to get you on the Bird Rock vibe.
I was reluctant to throw it out there just because you like it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a good spot. There's definitely some good spots to be hanging out in.
And then this is my favorite question. What's your favorite food since coming to San Diego? I'm a foodie, mate.
That's a good question.
Some of the what's Danny Lee like eating over here that he wasn't eating in New Zealand or Japan?
I'm pretty straight up and down. I'm a pretty picky eater, to be honest.
Yeah, you like well done steak, mate. So to be honest, I've had to let that go and be friends with you with that, regardless of that.
It's a tricky question that you've thrown on me right now, but there's lots of different delicacies. There's lots of different styles and flavors. I'm loving the Mexican flavor.
Can't go wrong with that.
The fish tacos and the burritos and.
Like, how do you beat that?
Yeah, that's a go-to for my son. But I do appreciate the finer foods and steak.
Yeah.
Rare Society.
Yeah, a few trips to Rare Society.
Rare Society. Ryan Patterson. Thank you very much. He's a beautiful restaurant that we've been lucky enough to go along.
Mate, it's some of the best steak I've ever had. Like, genuinely, if you're in San Diego, it's definitely worth giving it a go. Like, it's not just a biased plug. Like,
and you have
I smash food there on my own dime all the time.
I can attest to that you've downed a lot of meals there, and some quality at that. But you have the option of your meat as well. Like, you can take it through that range of what quality, what sort of temperature you want, and how much you want it cooked. So that's the key to that.
Well done, mate. The one guy who gets
medium to well.
Yeah,
medium to well. I'm not right over the top, but I don't want it moving around on my plate like you do.
Nah, fair enough. All right, Danny, last question. As a coach, as a player, as an athlete, everyone has a purpose in life or a driver. Like, what's your why? Like, why do you do this? Like, what makes you get up every day and want to do this?
I mean, there's a number of things, but I mean, ultimately, I'm a father and a husband, and I've got to provide. So I'm lucky enough to be doing something that I love and get paid for it. Really similar to being a rugby player. The downside is that you go from contract to contract like you are as rugby players, and you're always looking at when the end of that contract comes around, what are you going to do next? And there's pros and cons around that. The lack of stability around my type of role. But for me, I just love doing what I'm doing. As I said, going from a player to a coach, I've stayed in rugby my whole life. I feel I've got some value in the game, and I like to share that value to the players that are coming through. I want to win competitions. I want to succeed in doing what I'm doing, but I want to enjoy the ride as well. I want to be in places like San Diego and living the dream here with the lifestyle and the location and the weather that goes with it, but also equally a fantastic rugby organisation that is still learning and growing, and I feel I'm that guy that can help us grow and get to the point where we need to be, and share my knowledge with the people around me.
Awesome, mate. Danny, thanks for your time on the show. You didn't disappoint as the debut episode, so all that begging was worth it, mate. So thanks for coming on. It's a pleasure, and good luck this season. We look forward to seeing more of you.
Thanks very much. It's a pleasure being the first on this, and I wish you all the best with all the others that are coming after, which you may struggle with.
I'm going to say, I was going to say it's only going to go upwards from here, but I feel like we've set a good bar for day one, so we'll see, mate. We'll see.
Good luck, mate.
I also appreciate, you shaved, hair done nice, mate, nice and fresh for it.
Yeah,
that's what we like to see.
Got to look sharp.
Yeah, you set a good standard now, mate. I'll expect the same from the lads and everyone else who comes on. So thanks, mate. All the best.
No problem.
Well, that is a wrap on our debut episode of the Scrum Diego podcast, San Diego Legion's newest podcast, catering to all of the American audience of rugby, but especially our loyal Legion fans. Big thank you to Danny for coming on the show. So much honesty, insight. Great to see some of the layers peeled back of the man. I've loved working with him as a coach, and I think there's a lot to come from San Diego Legion this season, and I think you just got a little snippet of what's to come. So thanks for his honesty. Thanks all for loving and watching this podcast or listening to it if you're on audio. We really appreciate the support. Lots more to come from us. Keep an eye on next week's episode, as we'll have a San Diego Legion player on the show to get some behind the scenes insight, see what's going on in the world of rugby, and lots more. So thank you from all of us here. Thanks for watching the debut. We'll see you again next week.